Hi, my name is Becky Liner, and I'm the Executive Vice President for the James Madison Institute. In addition to that, I also serve as the Director of our Center for American Ideals, where we coordinate many activities related to civics education for students. We try to reach students anywhere from elementary school through college. Today, we're celebrating National Thrift Week. And I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Bill Maddox, who has a very special guest to introduce to you today. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Becky. We're joined today by an old friend of ours, good friend of the James Madison Institute, Dr. Benjamin Franklin. And we're here, as Becky mentioned, to talk about Thrift Week, which is a celebration that began over 100 years ago in the city of Philadelphia, inspired by the example of Benjamin Franklin. In fact, Thrift Week each year begins on Benjamin Franklin's birthday, the 17th of January. It precedes the following week. And we like to celebrate it here in Florida at the James Madison Institute, and are just delighted today to have Dr. Franklin to join us and to talk with us a little bit about thrift. So welcome, Dr. Franklin.
Well, thank you for having me, Mr. Maddox. I'm always happy to be of service. And in fact, at my age, it is always good to be on this side of the turf.
So the word thrift is one that is a little bit uncommon, or at times odd to people in our day. It comes from the same root word as thriving, and has a number of different elements that I know that you wrote about and talked about a lot in things like Poor Richard's Almanac and in your book, The Way to Wealth. And so I want to have you help us unpack all that thrift means today. And I want to begin by talking about industriousness, about working hard, which is perhaps the first element of someone who is thrifty, someone who is making wise use of their time, their talent, their treasure. And so when I think of you as a hard worker, I mean, you were involved in so many things over the course of your life, from publishing newspapers and writing books to inventing all sorts of things. And I guess one of the stories that I've heard you tell, and that many people are very familiar with, is the story of your discovery of electricity, which was not something that happened overnight. Tell us a little bit about how you went about the process of figuring out electricity and demonstrating that.
Yeah, of course, Mr. Maddox. We in my time knew of electricity. In fact, many of us experimented with electricity, rubbing a woolen cloth along a glass rod. And you could pick up little bits of paper, you could do other things with that. But it occurred to me that there must be something common with the electrical fluids. I would often, and I'm sure it's happened to you during the winter, you would walk across the floor, especially in your stocking feet, reach for the latch of a door or reach for a companion and have a small shock emanate either from the latch or who you're reaching for. And I would observe this small shock, or the light that would be given off. And it looked so much to me like lightning from the sky during a storm. And it got me to thinking, can the electrical fluid, which makes up our shock, could it be the same as lightning? Because my thought was, as I'm watching the sky, clouds rubbing against each other, and I'm picturing my feet in stockings rubbing against the floor. And I came up with the idea of flying a kite. And on the kite, it would allow my experiment to reach into the clouds. I had a key attached to a silken cord that was also led back to myself. And I wondered, can I collect some of the electric fluid from the clouds? Now, I know over years, people have said that my kite was struck by a bolt of lightning. You know for as well as I, Mr. Maddox, that if my kite had been struck by lightning, would I be standing or sitting before you today? Absolutely not.
I don't think so.
And and I must say that over the years, others trying to repeat my experiment were not as careful as myself. And to any that are listening, I must say, do be very careful with the electrical fluids. Some people have died or have hurt themselves greatly. But in my case, I'm watching the cord on my kite, and I noticed the fibers, especially as the cord started to dampen, fibers would arise and stand upright. And I wondered if at this point I was absorbing, or the string was absorbing the electrical fluid from the clouds. I reached my knuckle up to the key. And yes, in fact, a small bolt of electricity leapt from the key to my finger, proving to me that lightning and electricity were one and the same. And by using Leyden jars from Leyden in Holland, the town of Leyden, I was able to actually store some of that lightning, some of that electrical fluid. But again, with my experiments, I learned that you had to be careful, because on more than one occasion, I found myself awakening with my hands and feet tingling as I got up from the floor from the sudden discharge. But there is much more I can talk about with the electrical fluids, and I know our time is short. So do you have any other queries?
I mean, and I'm reminded of the fact that you not only tested and proved your hypothesis that lightning and electricity were the same, but then went on to create a very practical device, a lightning rod, that helped to provide safety to people, because it would attract the electricity, the lightning, and prevent people from being as susceptible to being hit by lightning themselves. So that was a very practical application of the lessons that you had learned during that storm that day. What's interesting, though, about the story of electricity and your use of the kite, and it's tied to this topic today of thrift. Another aspect of thrift is eliminating waste. It's commonly associated with frugality, with not overspending especially. But you were interested in eliminating waste in all sorts of ways, including wasteful action. And I'm reminded of a really kind of amusing story about another kite that you used to propel you or take you across one side of a pond or something. Tell us a little bit about this story.
Well, Mr. Maddox, as you may remember, as a lad, I was a great enthusiast of swimming. I thoroughly enjoyed getting into the water, swimming on the rivers and the lakes, especially around Boston, where I grew up. And one day I was flying a kite, and it was becoming quite warm, and I wanted to refresh myself. But I did not want to lose my kite. So I prepared myself and went into the water, quite refreshing. I'm holding onto the kite. At this point, I'm floating on my back. And to my amazement, within a short period of time, my head is striking the bank of the lake on the other side, on the shore. The power of the wind had pulled me with my kite across the pond, across the lake. And I wondered, just like in a sailboat, that the power of the wind can do much work for us. And I found it quite amusing to be pulled around the lake using nothing but a kite.
So it sounds to me like you were America's first windsurfer. Is that right?
Well, I'm not familiar with the term wind surfer, but I must admit that I was pulled across, moved from one part of the lake to the other using just the wind. So yes, I would say that I was your first, what was that, wind surfer?
Windsurfer.
Wind surfer.
We'll move on to another topic. So we've already talked about your discovery of electricity and lightning and the creation of lightning rods and the ways in which, and there were many other examples of ways in which you contributed to mankind through your inventions and whatnot. And another aspect of thrift is sometimes called stewardship, or in other discussions, references given to the importance of generosity, that not only should we work hard and earn all we can, and not only should we be careful with what we earn and save all we can, not spending extravagantly or wastefully, but that we should also be warm-hearted and generous and give all that we can. And among the things that you have given mankind is something that I see you displaying there on your face, what we know today as bifocals. Tell us a little bit about your invention and why you came up with this idea of cutting up glasses and creating something new to help you see.
You're referring, of course, to my double spectacles. And this came about while I was serving the United Colonies in France, trying to convince the French court to support and to help the American United Colonies. But as such, I was always having to change my spectacles. I would be talking to someone close and I would have to have one pair of spectacles on. And then if I was to talk to someone at the other end of a table or farther away, I would have to stop, change my spectacles to be able to see them clearly or to see what they might be referring to at the end of the table. And it occurred to me that if I had an oculist, a lens grinder or lens maker, take the lens and cut them in half and make the lens that allows me to see close or clearly far away, and the lens that allows me to see closer, see clearly up close, put those two halves together in one frame. And by merely lifting or lowering my eyes, I could see clearly not only you, but whoever might be at the end of the table. Mm-hmm. And my double spectacles seemed to work quite well and allowed me not only to save time, but it saved me money as well. So I would not have to buy two sets of spectacles.
So what you call double spectacles, we now call bifocals, but by any name, they were a great invention, and they have been enormously helpful to many, many people over the years. You mentioned that you made your first set of bifocals or double spectacles while you were in France. You helped French save time, or at least save daylight, and helped inspire an idea that many in our day enjoy, which is called something we call daylight savings time. So help me understand exactly what it was that you observed in France that caused you to think that they were wasting candles and could save themselves money and save themselves daylight by changing things up.
Yes. In the court of France, much of the business was actually conducted in the evenings around the tables, long tables, people eating, drinking, discussing, and much business was actually performed during these discussions and these suppers. And after returning home from one such soiree, I happened to awaken early. And to my amazement, as I opened my eyes and looked around the edge of the window, I saw that there was light streaming in around the cracks. I arose from my bed, opened the shutters, and do you know that the sun was fully shining, was bright? It was at some time late in the morning, and it occurred to me that if people would just arise, say an hour earlier, go to bed an hour earlier, think of how many candles could be saved, and the price of those candles. At one time, I thought just for the city of Paris alone, some 40,000 Libra per year could be saved. And just think how that much money would help General Washington and the Army and our cause for liberty. And for those that would not want to get up that hour earlier, I propose that cannon be placed at intersections throughout the city, and at the appointed hour, they would be fired. No balls, just a charge. And that would awaken the sluggards. And after but a few days, people's habits would change. And we would save not only that wasted time during the morning, but all that money in purchasing candles. And from what you say, I'm quite happy to hear that those of us, or those in my fellow citizens in the United States, have seemed to have adopted such an idea and are making use of it. Thank you very much for that.
Yeah, no, we've made very good use of that idea. And one of the things as I was listening to you talk, it reminded me of some of your most famous sayings that were recorded in Poor Richard's Almanac and The Way to Wealth and other writings that you did about the importance of thrift. And one of those sayings went something like this: early to bed, early to rise. Help me. What's the rest of it?
Early to bed and early to rise will make one healthy, wealthy, and wise. For if you go to bed early and you rise early, you'll be well rested. That is good for the body and helps you maintain your health. You have more time to pursue your work, and that in turn shows up in your wealth. And by being healthy and working for your money, in time, it is hoped that you will become wise. And hence, healthy, wealthy, and wise.
All right. No, so I mean, thrift really is all about wisdom, about using our resources wisely, about being good stewards of our time, our talent, our treasure. There were a lot of interesting things that you wrote about the wise use of resources, of not overindulging at the table, lest we we should eat to live and not live to eat, and things of that nature. But there was one saying that I found particularly interesting, and I want to get your feedback on, and that had to do with how long you should stay or how long you should want company to spend when a visitor comes to your home. And there was something about fish here. Do you recall that saying? After 3 days, fish. Help me out.
Fish and visitors will begin to stink. After 3 days, fish and visitors begin to stink. Have you ever brought a fresh caught fish home? And
Right.
we had a portion of it for your supper that evening, but you decide to leave the rest of it for several days to consume later. After 3 days, do you really want to eat the remainder of that fish? Of course
Not
not.
usually, no.
It has started to smell.
All right.
Well, and I'm sure you've had guests visiting in your lovely home. And for the day or two, it is quite nice to have.
No, it's a good word of advice.
I'm sorry? And
I think it's a good word of advice. It's one I had never really given a lot of thought to until I saw that you had written it down. But I do find that a 3-night visit is a good rule of thumb for me to follow when I visit others or when others come to visit me. So we've talked about fish and how you made use of their smell to convey an important idea regarding our use of time. But there's another animal that I'm interested in hearing you talk about, because I have marveled at all the good ideas that you offered the people of your day that we continue to benefit from and enjoy today. But I must say that there was at least one occasion when I'm not sure you had the best idea. And that has to do with our national bird. Help us understand why you opposed the idea of America's national symbol being the bald eagle, and instead proposed a very different sort of bird for our national symbol.
well, in my thought, the turkey is the most noble bird. It minds its own business. It's rather good to look at, pleasant to look at. It works for its meals. And as I say, it minds its own business. Where the eagle may be a nice looking bird, but in truth, eagles steal from other birds, will get into the way in the way of others. And is that something we want for our national emblem? A bird that steals and a bird that puts its beak into other business? No. And on top of all that, the turkey, as I said, is a most noble bird. It's an American bird. You find eagles throughout the world. But also, the turkey is quite good to eat and sustain our people.
Well, we do enjoy a Thanksgiving celebration every November that often centers around turkeys, and people will often continue to eat them through the Christmas holidays. But we're now in January. It's Thrift Week. Many people have turned their attention to doing what you advocated, which is to be careful about overeating, about cutting back, about eliminating waste. And so I'm not sure this is the best month for you to be making your case for turkey. And truthfully, I'm not sure that in any month, having the wild turkey as the national symbol for America is a really good idea. But hey, no one's perfect. You can't get it right every time. And we greatly appreciate the fact that you got it right on a lot of things, that you not only were a statesman who helped lead us through the early days of our country, being one of only 6 men to sign both the Declaration of Independence and the Bill of Rights, but to also leave us all these wonderful inventions and all of this good advice about thrift, about being industrious, about being frugal, about being generous. And so we are thankful for your contributions to American life, and hope that you have, as we hope to have, a really great Thrift Week this year. Thank you, Dr. Franklin.
Well, thank you, Mr. Maddox. Thank you for hosting me in this wonderful meeting. And I do hope to see you soon.
I hope so as well. And I want to turn things back to Becky Liner for a closing word.
Thank you so much for joining us today for our Thrift Week celebration with Dr. Ben Franklin. If you have any questions at all about the James Madison Institute or our civics education initiatives, please visit our website at www.jamesmadison.org. Have a great day and be thrifty.